In the last session, we had seen writing the business logic within the controllers. As we are aware, as per MVC architecture, we are not allowed to write even a single line of code within the methods of a controller. So if you see here, within the method of YSG display, there's a logic, the ABAP logic, which is written within the controllers, within the method of a controller over here, which is against to the framework. And where we are not following or fulfilling MVC architecture. In order to avoid writing business logic within the controllers, we have to create model. But as per the discussions or as per Webdynpro ABAP, we do not create models in Webdynpro ABAP. Then how do we fulfill MVC architecture? In Webdynpro ABAP, we create service call and assistance class, and we consider service call and assistance class as a model. I do not say service call and models or service call and assistance class or models. I just say to consider service call and assistance class as a model. But whereas in Webdynpro Java, we create models. Reason is because the main importance of model is that which connects between two different systems. Say for example, in Webdynpro Java, the front-end screen is designed in Java, in Webdynpro Java, and the back-end functionality is in your ABAP system. Now, to connect between SAP system and the Java system, we create models. But whereas in Webdynpro ABAP, as we are within the ABAP environment, within the ABAP stack, we do not create models. But in order to fulfill the architecture, the functionalities of MVC, we work with service calls and assistance class. Today in the session, we focus on creation of service calls. Service calls. Service call generally with SAP initial version with ECC 6.0, service calls were used or service calls were created in order to make use of existing function modules or RFCs or BAPs in Webdynpro. But from enhancement pack 2 onwards, service calls are used or service calls are created in order to work with function modules or RFCs or BAPing, and service calls are also used to call methods of classes, and service calls are also created for web services. So hope you are aware of web services. So even when we create a web service proxy name, web service proxy name should be assigned to web service. So this is the difference between the initial system and ECC 6.0 initial version and the other enhancement packs with ECC 6.0. In the third session, we create a service call and we make use of any function module or RFC or BAP. So what we do first, let me create a function group. I say YSG underscore FM, or let's say YSG underscore group, and I name this as function group for WDA, taking this as local object. And now to this particular function group, I am just creating a function module. and the function module name would be YFG underscore, for example, SM, or you can say service call to display materials. Okay, and let's define an importing parameter as IV Matna, which would be of a type Matna, and defining an exporting parameter, say yes Mara, and it should be of type Mara. Now, what are we going to do? Based on the given material number, we are just displaying the details of the material. So, say select single star from Mara into PS underscore Mara, where Matna equal to IV Matna. Let's say this. And activate the function module. Now, the main motto over here is we have to use this particular function module in Webdynpro app. Okay, so I'm going to create a component, and I say YFG display service call, a name of an object or component just to define, and I just give a description of service call, and hope we are aware. We generally create a Webdynpro component. By default, name of the window would be name of your component. So you can change name of the window as required. I define the window as W underscore main and the view name as V underscore main. Now say just continue and create this under the local object. The best practice, as I said, activate the component first. Okay. Now, in order to create service call, right click on the component, say create service call. There are 7 steps in order to create service call. This is a wizard which generates or which creates the context. In general, what we used to do in the previous sessions, we used to create context and we used to write logic which is required or which is necessary for the context and the view. But when we create a service call based on the services, when I say services, it might be the function module or might be RFC, DAPI, classes, whatever. Based on what we select, based on the given importing and exporting structures, the context gets created along with the logic that is required. Logic which is related to context binding and the fetching of the data or calling the function module, etc. So, you can please just go through the text, what has been here. You understand what we spoke now. And the first step should be select controller. When we say select controller, whether are we going to create service call under which controller? We generally create service call under component controller. Okay? And when we generally create under component controller, we say use existing controller. In case when we select new controller, it means that we are trying to create a custom controller. The reason is that because, taking an example of Webdynpro Java, when they, generally in Webdynpro Java, they create n number of service calls. When they create n number of service calls, the complete logic or the nodes gets created under component controller. When there is a huge amount of data or the logic present in the component controller, it initially or it generally impacts performance of an application. So, in order to avoid the load on the controller, on the component controller, we create custom controllers. The functionality of custom controllers is to avoid load on the component controller. Okay. So, now I'm just selecting use existing controller radio button, and when we click F4 under the controller, then we see component controller of the current component. Select the component controller, say continue. Now, the next step would be select continue. Now here we have an options. Whether are you going to define function modules, BAPIs or classes. For all the three we had only one option, is a function module. Or are we going to define any methods, are we going to try or are we going to call any methods of the classes? If so, then define select class method. In case if you are trying to call any web services, then define web service proxy. As of now, in the current example, we are going to call, we have defined a function module, so we are just selecting function module radio button and then say continue. And here is a place where we have to define name of the function module. So we have created a function module by the name YSG, click F4, and the function module name is YSG service call underscore Mara, and say continue. When we say continue, we can see here the importing and exporting parameters have been defined here, and under this column we have a pick list, and here based on the parameter what we select, accordingly importing and exporting parameters gets created. In case if we select controller or in case if we select context node or attribute, then what happens? This gets created under the context of a component controller. Initially what happens? First, in the component controller context, first a node gets created by the name of function module. What is the name of the function module? Say for example YSG service call. So this would be the parent node. And under the parent node we create an importing. Importing is a parameters what we are declared. We are declared importing parameters, right? So this importing parameter, first it gets created as a child node under the parent node, and the parameter what we are defined under the importing gets created as an attribute. So SIB underscore mat now, which is an attribute. Then under parent node, one other child node gets created by the name exporting. This would be a child node to the parent node. And under exporting what we did, we had created a structure. We had defined ESMARA, and ESMARA has been assigned with a structure. As I told you, in general, in ABAP with a structure, in Webdynpro it gets created as a node, right? So under exporting, a subnode gets created by the name of your structure, ES underscore Mara. So this would be subnode to the child node, and to this subnode attribute gets created like mat now. Here is EA, ERNAM, etc. So this would be the flow how it gets created in the component controller context. Okay. Now if required, you can change name of the parameters, else you can keep as such. So for time being, I keep as such and I say continue. And as I said, a method gets created by the name execute underscore name of the function module. If required, we can change or you can keep as such. Now I say continue, and if you click on complete, what we have discussed gets generated, else it would get cancelled. Now let me click on complete. Now as I said, we are within the component controller context, and there is a node. The node has two subnodes, importing and exporting. Under exporting, we had an attribute called IDMatner, and exporting which is created under the parent node, which has a subnode called ESMARA, and this has the entire structure of the MARA. And as discussed, within the methods, we had a method which has got created, and this particular method will have the complete pre-generated logic which reads the data is entered by the user and calling the function module over here, passing the data to the function module, and this line of code sets the data to the context. Now, how do we make use of this within the view controller? Now, the point is we had the node which is already created, and we had the method, the logic which is generated. Now, within the view controller, in order to design the screen, first we have to define the context. And then to define the context, the nodes have already got created within the component controller. Now, I need this particular node to be present within the view controller, because the node of the context will have the data once the method of the component controller is executed. So what I do, I'll just drag and drop the node of the component controller onto view controller, and we call this functionality as context mapping. What is context mapping? We see in detail in later stage. In general, for your idea, context mapping is used, or context mapping is defined in order to share the data between two different controller contexts. To share the data between two different controller contexts, we define context mapping. Okay? Now, taking reference of the node, let's design the layout. First, I'll create a group called search, and I enter the name, the text as enter, material number, and to the group, I first select the group UI element and then click on the code widget in order to design the screen using the form template, and click on the context button to select with which node the form needs to be created. Select the importing node, say continue. Okay? We had an input field, and input field has a property called value which is bounded with the attribute IDMatner. Say continue. Okay? Now to the group, I'll create a button, say BTN search, and button has property called text. So I define the text as search and create an event to the button. Okay. Now, based on given input value, we have to display the data. So to display data, I'll take one other group and to the group we give some caption as I say details of the materials, and select the group, and using the code widget I'll design the form. Why are we designing form? Because we are displaying only one record, that is details of the selected material. So select the context and select the node with which you need form to be created. And there are n number of fields. I do not want the data of all the fields. So I'll just unselect them. So the context panning has been unselected, and just select the fields that are required. Say continue. Okay. By default, the group has a layout called flow. So that's the reason. First, the row has been filled and then it has come to the second row. So for example, if I take this as matrix layout, then first it comes into the same row. Say from the name, I need this to be in the new line. So select the UL element, label of the UL element, and select matrix head data, which comes to the new row. Okay? Based on the layout type that we design, accordingly, the screen gets designed. Now, on action of this particular button, now we have to write logic on action of a button search. So in the last previous sessions, what we used to do on action of this particular search button, we used to write the logic. But if you see, there is a method which is already created in the component controller when service call was created. Now, how do we call method of component controller? Calling method from component controller. So to call the method from component controller, we have an attribute called wd_comp_controller, which acts as a reference to the component controller. To call the methods or XYZ data of the component controller, we use attribute wd_comp_controller. So, taking reference of the attribute wd_comp_controller, we see the methods that are available within the component controller. We have created a method called execute_ysg_display_mara. What the method? So just declare this method, save this. Now let's activate the entire component. And now let's create our Webdynpro application. Save this. Say execute. Now, here if you see the tab name has been service call. So whatever the name that we define in the application, that particular name will be displayed in the tab. Now let's select some material number which is available. So let's say 007. When you click on search, the details of the material 007 was displayed. If you select 08, the search details of 8 was displayed. If you select 9, details of material 9 is displayed. This is how we work with service call. But working with service call, a developer has a lot of advantages because he need not write any piece of code because the logic is automatically generated when service call is created. But we had disadvantages of using service call over here. As I said initially, we are not allowed to write even a single line of ABAP logic within the controllers. But if you see here, we are calling, or there is a physical presence of function module within the controller. If you can see here, we have a physical presence of function module which is called in the component controller, which is not allowed. We are not allowed to call function modules or BAPIs or classes or even a single line of statement of ABAP should not be available physically within the controllers. Now, what is the other alternative, which is nothing but assistance class? How do we work with assistance class? We see that in the next session. Thank you.